Call to order the Public Health, Safety, Judiciary, and Ethics Committee. May I have a roll call, please?
Here.
Here.
Alderman Sorrentino.
Here.
Alderman Sismarski.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Alderman Sismarski is not here. Alderman Messina.
Here.
Alderman Woods.
Here.
And Mayor, please.
All right, okay. Well, I need an approval of the minutes of the meeting from September 9th, 2021, the Public Health, Safety, Judiciary, and Ethics Committee minutes.
I'll make a motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, report and recommendation, there's three. Review of section 6.303.A.1 of the Municipal Code of the City of Wooddale relating to the storage of refuse containers. Want to take over that, Chief?
Sure will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a topic that's been more frequent since the police department has been more involved in the property maintenance inspections since 2019. Differing complaints, differing interpretations of what's allowed. And during last year's strategic planning session, we discussed it as a item that we were going to tackle during this winter and try and come to some type of resolution. So essentially right now, the garbage toters, which of course the current ordinance was written prior to having garbage toters, where everyone kind of had their own garbage cans and mixture of things. It only allowed for the storage of garbage containers behind the front edge of the residence, basically. Couldn't be in front of that front setback line of a residence. In the meantime, we've had some different complaints within the PD that we've handled, some that are technically in violation, some that are blatantly in violation, and kind of in trying to be consistent, we're coming to City Council to see if you want to make any adjustments to it. And essentially, I kind of outlined in the memo, there's really three options. I guess there could be many more, but I thought kind of trying to summarize them. One, of course, is make no changes and just enforce the current code for anything that's placed in front of the front setback of a residence. Just so you know, if that becomes to be consistently interpreted that way, there's likely a lot of violators out there that we'll have to deal with. In the meantime, we've kind of handled it on a per complaint basis, and then enforcement, of similar ones that we noticed. So you could make no changes. The other one that you could do is revise the ordinance to reflect that no more than the 2 city garbage toters, the official ones, can be stored in a manner that's visible from the street, and allow a little bit of flexibility to the residents to find an appropriate place on their property that doesn't, increase garbage. And you would probably want to say that's the only thing they could have that would be anywhere approaching the front of the house, not a bunch of additional bags or garbage being stored. I guess with that one, you would probably want to avoid, and we've had some complaints of similar things. You don't want someone storing it probably right in front of the garage door or right in their driveway, but some people have properties that lend itself to areas that might be technically in front of the house, but not in a manner that's, that looks bad for the community. And then the third option, which has been brought up before, but I would say would be the most drastic option, is to change the ordinance to nowhere having them be visible from the street. I think in that case, you're going to have hundreds, if not thousands of houses that are going to have an issue with that. But it was brought up as a possibility in the past, so that's why it's highlighted in here. So the police department and the rest of the staff really doesn't have an opinion on what has to be done with this, but we wanted to bring it forward to you as this was an ongoing question from some of the council members.
Okay, thank you, Chief. So, rephrasing that, there's three options here that we're discussing. No changes whatsoever to revise the ordinance so that there's no more than 2. And the most drastic is there will be no visibility whatsoever. So, Chair recognizes Alderman Woods.
Thank you. So
right now, just for clarity, the way it stands, I can bring my garbage cans in and have them as long as they break the front plane of the house. That's legal to have them there, even though everybody can see them as they drive down the block.
That, if it breaks the front plane of the house, then that's technically, that's a violation. There's no prohibition about them being visible from the street now, but they just have to be set back from the front edge of the house.
Right, that's what I'm
back.
saying. So as long as I push back from the front plane of the house,
They can be visible, and you can have pretty much as much garbage as you want at that location, as long as it's not a rodent problem or something else.
so I would think that that's a terrible option, because if everybody had their cans down my whole block, I can't imagine driving down anybody's block where that would look.
Well, that's
Good.
permitted by current ordinance right now, and if you go down the blocks, many are visible on every block.
Right.
Yeah.
Alderman Messina.
Yeah, and it should tend to lend itself to be cleaned, but we've run into issues where people have actually invested in a concrete pad to the side of their home. So in the front of their plane, it breaks the front of the plane, but it's to the side. So it doesn't actually look bad when they've done it and they've invested the money. So it's kind of like one of these oddballs that we brought correct. Like, the guy spent money pouring a concrete pad on the side. It's not visible, it doesn't look bad. He even had it blocked with an evergreen for the most part. So I don't know if there's any good answer. I almost feel like we just leave it subjective like we have been, because to your point, I think the mayor's always said this too, is like consistency. And to be honest, when we've brought things to you, it's always been like almost like a raid, right? You go in and you're like, hit a raid, you do it, we get multiple people upset, we tweak, and then we let it be again. I don't know if there is a good answer. So I don't know if any change.
Alderman Catalano.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have an issue with, there's some homes in, in Wooddale that you have the garage going inside the house, and on the two sides, you got steps going up. And some of those homeowners, they leave their garbage cans on the side because they can't bring them up those steps. Especially if you're a senior, you're gonna have a hard time. Yeah, I know somebody told me maybe they should put them inside the garage, but a lot of people don't like their garbage inside the garage. So we might have an issue with those type of homes.
And just to clear, we're not advocating that they shouldn't be visible. It was brought up as an opinion that could be the way it is. That's the only reason that's brought forward. We're aware that would probably cause some issues, and you'd likely have guaranteed hundreds, if not thousands of residents that would have to change how they store them right now.
Mayor? I'm sorry, Tony, were you finished?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay,
Thanks.
Mayor?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't like them inside the garage either, but if I don't put them inside my garage, it's gonna be on the side of the garage, and my neighbor's gonna look at it every time he sits in the kitchen. So I put them inside the garage to be a good neighbor, right? Honestly, if we just sent those people that keep them right out front, in front of the garage all week long, because our code's really against that, right? They have to be, so there's the corner of your house, you gotta be behind the corner of the house. I understand some houses you're gonna see them as you're driving down, others are behind bushes and whatnot. If we can get those people, just try and slide them back a little bit. And you wanna be courteous to your neighbor, because if you're putting them right here, and your neighbor's kitchen or living room is right there, and they're looking outside, they don't wanna be looking at garbage cans all day. And those cans, honestly, when they're closed, I got them in the garage all summer long, you don't smell anything.
Well, and if you wanted to go along that route, it could be something of, not stored on a driveway or area used for vehicle use, some type of wording that would satisfy that, but maybe not, it would allow some flexibility that it's not the front edge of the house. Because some people actually, I know in some areas you have someone whose garage will be on the side, and then actually the side of their garage is the front farthermost part, and then the front of their house actually would be way back there, but they have them behind a bush. So it's a difficult one to standardize, but maybe if you want to make some revision, you start with not putting them in front of the garage doors and or on a paved surface, that's used for vehicles. If they use pour a separate paved area, then that would be fine. I don't know.
How about the idea of, since nobody wants to look at the garbage cans, why don't we look into garbage can cover that would cover both cans, so it'd be easily removable to put the garbage in, but while they're out, regardless, on the side of the house, wherever the cans are, you're not looking at two garbage cans. You're gonna look at more of a aesthetic type view when you look out the window, and then maybe we could do some sort of a cost sharing on that cover. Won't look like, it'll look like a barbecue cover more so than a garbage can cover. Just my little thoughts out there.
Yeah, and again, this is council's direction. We'll take the lead with what direction you have, and we just tried to offer some suggestions, and whatever you guys
Appreciate
come up
that.
with, we'll implement, so.
Alderman Woods.
Yeah, thanks. So I think we need to do is to fine tune that language to Alderman Messina's and Alderman Catalano's point, or the mayor's. There's certainly a wide variety of homes and lot layouts or block layouts in the community. So there are certain areas in Alderman Catalano's area where he talks about the tri-levels and the ranches and the sloped driveways. But I have seen some of those people nicely enclose them or plant a bush or something. I think the mayor hit the nail on the head. It's about being a good neighbor, so leave your garbage cans on the front sidewalk by the front of your house or something, where your neighbor walks out and that's the first thing they see in the morning is the garbage can, or you're having people come over. That's really not a desired outcome. I don't know what the actual language should look like or sound like. I think we can tweak that. I think, to your point, that not on the driveway, not on the main sidewalk going to the front door, something like that. Maybe we just add a couple clarifiers to that statement. And not make it a blanket, you can't see it from the street completely, because part of me, while I don't want to be, that strict, we force the businesses to do that, and then we tell the residents you can put your garbage can wherever you want. So we want to beautify the city, but only on the main streets. The side streets they can look as bad as they want to. We can put the garbage cans, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I've seen the ones that they just stick them right in front of their garage door, and they want us to keep them there all week. And we've addressed some of those issues, but I think those are the ones you really want to avoid, as opposed to someone
Right.
that store,
Exactly.
So maybe if it's council's desire, could come back with some language that says something that tailors it to driveways or in front of garage doors or areas that are intended for vehicle travel. And maybe start with that, and if we have to retweak, we can always
I think
tweak a
that if
little
we
bit
look
further.
at the housing stock, we can craft some language that will take care of the majority of the things. We're not gonna get 100%, I don't believe, but
Right.
just that, it will improve, drastically improve.
Alderwoman.
Thank you. So in the second option where it talks about, the manner to be visible from the street so long as the lids are closed and there's no additional garbage visible. I know that I've seen where people maybe didn't take advantage of the option when we first had the toters available to go with a larger size tote, and maybe they should have one now. So that might help too with some additional garbage if maybe we remind people that they can get a larger can if they opted for the smaller one, and maybe there's a new family there that didn't upsize their garbage cans or recycle cans, and that would eliminate some of the extra garbage.
Yeah,
That's overflowing and the lid's up, and, they have a party one week and there's just no place to put it because the can is just too small.
yeah, and that's something I could certainly work with Kate with and the garbage company. But yeah, I think since this first ordinance was written, there was no garbage toters, and everyone had their own mix and probably just a bunch of bags out there. And so if you are a little bit more lenient with it, then maybe you stick with but you can only have toters out there and not a whole bunch of extra garbage, and that maybe accomplishes the same thing, so.
Follow up, Nadine?
But there are times when people are, like I know for us, we've had other, you have a party or after holidays, you've got extra garbage too. I mean, there's times when, or you're, doing a household project. I mean, that's acceptable to do that because you can only fit so much in the cans, but it's not all the time. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't want that to be an issue,
No.
because it's a one-off thing, that they've got more garbage.
I would certainly agree, and our goal with all these property maintenance inspection stuff has been compliance. So our first, we've only had 5 that have had to go to adjudication. Everyone, our goal isn't to write citations or, you know, it's to address the issues, and then if someone refuses to come in compliance, then we'll take further steps. But someone having a party a couple times a summer or whatever, you know, we're not gonna be just walking on and writing citations for that, whatever the result of tonight is.
One more. So the timing of it, was there an issue with the time that the garbage was put out to the curb and the time it was taken in, the cans with that? Has that been an issue so much, or it's just the visibility of the cans?
More the visibility of the cans. We occasionally get complaints about the timing, and generally, it's someone that, well, I was going on vacation and I put it out early. We've had a couple of habitual people, and then we've just addressed them individually, and then it stops. In general, the timing isn't the issue, it's more the visibility
Okay.
that people complain about.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Alderman Jacob.
Yeah, and I would kind of agree with Alderman Woods. If we kind of cleaned it up a little bit but did away with the, you know, just, it's toters only. You can't have, like, I'm thinking of a vacant home in our ward that has trees and all kinds of stuff there besides the 2 toters. They have other stuff there, which if it was just the toters, it wouldn't look that bad.
Alderman Messina.
Yeah, so I think, Chief, I mean, I think you're on the right track with thinking about the stockade of homes we have, and think about even like some on the corner, which is, the corner lots are always difficult. I'd like the idea of like having that where we still allow, so maybe not in front of the doors, like you said, and not those areas where there are not paved surfaces, drivable surfaces. So maybe that entices somebody to do something where if they really have to do it, they have to do something on their own if they really want to keep it there, or they put it in their garage. Kind of forces their hand to do something. So I would make a motion, based on what the chief has kind of said, to not allow, to revise the ordinance as it stands, to not allow toters in front of overhead garage doors, nor on drivable surfaces. And that would be my direction/motion.
What about walkable surfaces to the front door?
I would say that would apply too. We can craft it for both of those.
That's what I say. My thought was that if you could look at that and then, because there might be some more that you want to add to it, but that's the underpinning of the idea. You know, maybe there's a couple other things we would add, or the way you would switch that language around a little bit, given corner houses, tri-levels, bi-levels, reed branches.
Now, maybe we can go to school on some of the associations in town that their rules and regs say the garbage has to be put out at a certain time at night, the night prior to pickup, and then put away by a certain time the next morning. And all the cans are stored in non-visible locations, generally speaking, back in the garages. And if there's a home or two within an association that keeps the cans out, it really stands out. So I can only imagine where there's blocks and blocks of residents and cans are strewn all over the place. We need to, I'll second Randy's motion on option number 2 to revise the ordinance and perhaps consider this timing element as well. Mayor, I'll get to you after the mayor, Nadine.
So just a quick follow-up. I mean, so some of the houses, and I've seen this, right, they have sidewalks going to their front doors right along the garage. The house is set back, the garage is forward. Now they have the cans near their front door, but it's kind of towards the back they have it behind bushes. Now, if you're really looking, you could see them, but honestly, most people driving, they're not gonna notice them. So when you draft this, I don't wanna have to get these people to change, because there's a few of them I've seen. If they got them out of the way, nobody sees them, and actually, it's more of a hindrance to their front door versus their neighbor's side yard, so.
And the ones we've dealt with have primarily been in response to complaints from neighbors. So, you know, there's going to still have to be some interpretation and discretion used in some of these situations. So.
I just don't want to create an issue where there hasn't been one. Not everybody's a problem.
Right.
Nadine?
Thank you. So I remember reading that there's a program for seniors that they can sign up to have the garbage company come and get their cans. So I mean, if we're gonna draft some language about where that can is or is not permitted, I'm just thinking of some seniors that I know that they, you know, leave their garbage can out because it's very hard to get to. And then they're not even the ones bringing it back and forth because the garbage company's doing that. So I wouldn't want that to be, you know, like that would almost have to be an exception if they're in the senior garbage program or something. You know,
Yeah.
where the garbage company's doing that.
I do know they have the service. I don't know specifically where it's supposed to be placed for that. I don't know
Right.
if you know more.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we're gonna consider that. I don't think there's a lot of incidents where that would happen. But if we notice it happening, certainly we're not gonna be citing anybody for violations, and we'll try to alleviate
Yeah,
whatever it
I would
is.
think that we would have like a list or access to a list of whose homes are in that, and obviously if somebody complains about that and it's one of the seniors' homes that are getting that service, that would kind of.
Yeah, I think as part of the refined language, I'm kind of curious myself as to how many homes do participate in that. I'm sure we can get that number from Flood Brothers, so we'll put that in the next council memo, because I'm curious myself.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Jacob?
No.
No? Okay. Alderman Currielli?
I'm just curious about the two garbage cans. Do people have more than two? And would this ruling apply? How would you deal with more than two?
Chief?
I think what you want to avoid is if they're going to be some location in front of the edge of the front of their house that they're putting two toters that look fine, you don't want them then also piling up a bunch of bags and other garbage, and, you know, the two toters does hold a lot of stuff. I think you just want to avoid someone that's, if they're gonna be throwing out mass things beyond the toters, keep that behind the house, and if the two toters look nice and neat in some area that's not, you know, that would be considered an exception, then don't have other refuse out there, bring that out separately, you know. If you have a regular spot that you're storing the toters, and you're cleaning out something for the weekend, well, then bring that out, you know, after that. So just to try and, if there are some exceptions, then keep it still clean and looking neat compared to a bunch of bags out there or anything else.
Alderman Messina?
Two questions. The first being around, I know Alderman Sorrentino mentioned screening. So is that something we want to think about for alternative means?
Covers.
Yeah, like, well, an alternative to a fine is you can show compliance by a resin screened enclosure or some type of enclosure, or is that just making it more complicated? That's my first question.
My only thought on that is, I do know someone who lives in another town who isn't allowed to have their cans visible from the street, so that's not what we're proposing here. But they literally have a pallet that they just stuck on the side of their house to hide the cans, and it's not me, but I know someone that does that to prevent it from being seen, but they're technically in compliance, so then it's gonna be, well, what's a good enough looking enclosure? I don't know if we wanna get into that.
Yeah.
Let's take one step here, is what I'm thinking. See if we can address the most problematic houses, and then if we have to come back a year from now and tweak it a little bit, we can do that.
Well, there was a motion made and second to explore option 2, where we revise the ordinance.
Hey, so could I finish that second point?
Go ahead,
So
Alderman.
that second point, I just want to make sure, Greg, the intent of this is not increased enforcement, but rather consistency and direction moving forward, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because we do occasionally get complaints about a house that would technically be in violation now, and then there's several other houses in the area that are also technically in violation.
Yep.
And if we get a little more flexibility on that, you know, we're gonna go after the most serious ones, and it's not for us to go out and find a whole bunch of things. That's not our goal with any of this.
Alderman Woods?
Yeah, mine will be the final one, then we can vote.
Okay.
Again, to Alderman Messina's point, we're not trying to ratchet things up, and probably 99.9% of the people comply already. Again, it's about being a good neighbor and beautifying the community, and so when we write that language, to Alderman Messina's point, if somebody plants a bush, and I'm driving down the street and the garbage can doesn't become the most pronounced element of the house, I think everybody's happy, as opposed to it standing out like Christmas ornaments on a tree. That's not a desired outcome, so that's all really that we're looking for, is to, you know, change that or tweak that a little bit to get a little more consistency or greater compliance.
Yeah, I would think that'd be a good goal. And then just for council's thoughts, you know, I did some considerable looking at other people's ordinances prior to this to try and see something that fits. Based on the feedback, I would say, I don't know if it's gonna be ready tomorrow. Give me a couple weeks to look at good language that might include some shielding or whatever, but doesn't require an enclosure, and then I'll bring it back for the council meeting in February. But I don't wanna rush it and just give you my language off the top of the head. I'll try and find some real good stuff out there, and maybe get Pat Bond's suggestions too on it. And if anyone has any to give to me on any language, let me know. We'll try and include it all, so.
All right, we'll take a vote, but my last comment, when you drive anywhere and you see those dumpsters that are put on people's drives that are remodeling or whatever they're doing, now just for a moment, close your eyes and see that dumpster, and now see the dumpster that's next door that's got an American flag painted on the side of it. I would say the one with the American flag, even though they're collecting the same stuff, is more easily drawn to the eye than some ugly empty dumpster. Hence my suggestion for possibly a cover that would go over both of the garbage cans. Just a little food for thought. Any other questions before we call the roll here or take the vote? Fire away, young lady.
Alderman Catalano.
That's for a revised, right, option 2?
We're on option 2,
Yes.
revise the ordinance.
Alderman Currielli.
Yes.
Alderman Jacob.
Yes.
Alderman Ames.
Yes.
Alderman Sorrentino.
Yes.
Alderman Messina.
Yes.
And Alderman Woods.
Yes.
Okay, and that passes. Chief, you got a little work to do now.
Sure do.
Option 1 would have been really cool, no changes.
Right.
All right, that's number 1. Number 2, an amendment to section 15.1319 of the Municipal Code of the City of Wooddale relating to certain post-Meridian parking, and section 15.1303 relating to parking in a prohibited place. Chief.
Thank you, sir. So these are kind of related, even though the parking in a prohibited place could be considered separately, but they kind of fit into each other. You know, currently overnight, vehicles are not allowed to park on the street from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. They can call in for permission up to 5 times per month. There's a number of reasons for this, and I listed in my memo, but one is just to prevent, you know, cars from sitting on the street inoperable and leaking fluids or whatever the case may be. You know, the police, our ability to recognize vehicles in neighborhoods overnight that, you know, may be committing crimes or something. You know, preventing those abandoned vehicles. And so there's a number of reasons that almost every town in the suburbs does have these overnight parking bans. So we're not advocating getting rid of that. There's some real good reasons for it. Street cleaning and snow plowing, which of course after 2 inches, they would have to remove it anyways. But just the general maintenance of the city and overall look of the city, I don't think we want to go to allow blanket overnight parking all the time, because you're going to have cars that won't move for weeks, and what you can have, and complaints that my neighbor's parking in front of my house, and we already deal with some of those issues. But regardless, what's come up recently several times is we've had some residents that have asked their elected officials to look at changing this ordinance, specifically kind of because some times have changed for some people, meaning people probably have more vehicles per household than there was back in when many of these houses were built. Kids are living at home longer. Some other things, you know, I know during the 08 to 10 time frame with the economic, you know, conditions, we seem to see more people per residence, whatever. But I also think there's another competing thing that's going on, is people use their garage for storage now. So there's been a request to look at some type of overnight parking permit for residents. And in the memo, I've listed out a number of things that in my research that people have really focused on, that if you're going to consider this, one, we have to decide if we want to consider this. But two, I think there needs to be some type of guidelines, such as, they're using all available parking that was designed for those residences, and/or if you wanted to say, well, if you have 3-car garage, at least 2 have to be used. That's really up to council to decide. But if we're gonna allow some type of this, you probably should have some type of guidelines that they do have to be using their available spots. They're not storing boats and all kinds of other things on their driveway that doesn't allow them to park vehicles there. But we are aware of some residents that have more kids at home and, situations that they're looking for some freedom to do things. So kind of open that for discussion. The biggest thing is what I'm seeing in other towns is ones that are doing it is they're allowing maybe 1 per residence. Also, that vehicle has to be, all the vehicles there have to be registered to the residents, with the exception of maybe 1 vehicle that's a company take-home vehicle. So it would be some type of permitting process and on-site inspection process with whatever parameters council desired to make sure they're utilizing all their available spaces. And then if they're in that situation, it could be a 1-month permit, could be, maybe offer a reduction for multiple months. Really designed however you want to design it. I tried to lay out a lot of thoughts as to what should be considered. And then the other part of this is, right now, the city ordinance calls for no parking on the sidewalk at all. And how we've handled individual violations is we've dealt with those individual locations, especially during the day is when we get the complaints. So if you wanted to make some more parking available to people in the overnight hours, you could consider an adjustment to the ban on parking on the sidewalk. Maybe I suggested between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. So at least, when people aren't walking, then they could utilize, parking over the sidewalk a little more. So those are the kind of considerations. I don't know if there's any desire to do an overnight parking permit, but I think we really need to consider the things that I laid out if we do have an overnight parking permit.
Good points, Chief. But, the point that kind of hit me was that registered to the owner of the property. Now, if with these families that are reuniting, if I go live with my parents and now my car is registered to me, how do we circumvent this type of a scenario where it needs to be registered to my father or my mother?
It would just have to be registered to the address, not to that different person, but to
Okay,
the
so
address.
A vehicle sticker would make that registration right?
Yeah, so you can just change it with the Secretary of State. If they're in a situation that they're living at a residence long-term, anything more than 30 days, they're supposed to change that address anyways with the Secretary of State. So this would, if I have, 2 parents and 3 kids living at home and 1 company vehicle, 5 of those 6 vehicles should be registered to the residents there in order to get it, is what I would say. What you probably want to avoid is someone that, could be storing vehicle for a friend or whatever the case is, or
Right.
again, utilizing their garage for just storage and not utilizing it for the vehicles, so.
Any question, Alderman Catalano?
Yeah, so, we did make changes over the years. Georgetown, how does that work? Georgetown Townhomes, that they always have a permit in because they permit because they don't have enough parking spots. How does that work?
So maybe, I don't know if anyone else has any different historical knowledge than I do, but it was my understanding that when Georgetown was built, there was a residential parking component built into that at the time. That's my understanding, but I don't know if anyone has any better knowledge on that. So I believe, I don't know if that was necessarily added after the development was done, but as a part of that they knew that was going to be happening with the townhouse development.
Okay, also, we're trying to accommodate some of these families that have come forward to me. They have spaces for 4 parking, they have 5 cars. And it's a nightmare for them trying to figure out where to park this car at night. So I believe if we tweak this, I don't think the whole city is going to come in and ask for permits. They have to qualify. But what do we do for the ones that have short, parking spaces? But like you explained, they have a bigger family now. what do we tell those people? It's a nightmare for them to figure out where they're gonna park their cars every night.
So I think I have an idea of a couple of those similar houses that you're talking about, and maybe the one that is having a particular issue. If, if they were allowed overnight to park over, hang over the sidewalk too, I was under the impression that they might be able to get the vehicles on there, or if not, at the most need one for on-street parking.
They need one for on-street parking, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's,
Mayor, oh, sorry. Follow up, Tony?
no, go ahead.
Mayor?
So, you said 5 cars and 4 spots. Does that include the garage?
Yeah.
So 2 in the garage and 2 in the driveway, they got a short driveway.
They said that the garages are clean, they can park 2 in the garage, 2 outside. They said that
Is there room for
they have an
this?
issue with 1 car.
So like the chief is saying, I have the same issue. Well, I had it, I don't have it anymore. We had 5 cars, 2 in the garage, 3 in the driveway. Third one's always, it's gonna, even if you keep your car all the way back, or keep both cars all the way up, you're still kind of blocking the sideways, and I honestly used to have many arguments with my kids. They'd pull in last, boom, right in the driveway. I go, how come the car's on the sidewalk? Well, Dad, people can walk around. I'd make them go back outside and put it on the street and bring it in around 8 o'clock. And I remember asking the chief, I go, do we give tickets if somebody's parked overnight? Because, there's issues. Some people are gonna have that, right? I don't have that anymore, but there's a lot of families with 4 or 5 cars, and some of the driveways, I know some of the driveways are really short. They can only get 1 car. Forget about the sidewalk. If you park the second car, a quarter of your car's in the street. So everything's different.
And I guess that's where I suggested that regardless of what you do on the overnight parking permit, we would be comfortable with removing the restriction on the sidewalk from, let's say, 8 PM to 7 AM, because your people that are walking during that, you could shorten it, you could lengthen it, but figured that was a good enough time that if people really needed extra spot, you're not gonna generally have people walking down the sidewalk during those times. You can do 9 to 5, I mean, whatever you wanna do.
In the summertime, people are walking longer because it's lighter longer, but in the wintertime, there's nobody walking at 8 o'clock at night.
Right.
Alderman
Unless
Woods?
they have to bring it up.
Thank you. I'm okay with what you want to do with the parking over the sidewalk. I would probably make it 9, because this summer, I know we can argue that in the winter, nobody's out, but I don't want to get into seasonal hours.
Yeah.
Right.
9 o'clock's a good time. I think that everybody's in by then, for sure. That should alleviate it. Part of the problem that I have with doing the on-street parking, as you point, that there's a lot of good safety, aesthetic reasons to have that. I mean, an officer could drive down the street and just look and see if there's cars. Doesn't have to drive down the street. If there are, and they shouldn't be there, then you drive down the street, so that makes sense. And sometimes it's just a matter of people just want the easy way out. I know that in the example, 1 car is gonna wind up being 3 cars. It's easier. Once you give me the permit, then I'm gonna buy the permits. So I don't know if I have the answer, for the issue, but, most people that got the 2 cars, 3 cars, 5 cars knew their parking situation before they got all the cars. I don't think it's my job to figure out everybody's parking for them. So that's just my opinion.
I would just offer a suggestion on that if you do allow it, you limit it to one per household, 1 permit per household. And I do think you have to make sure that they're utilizing all of the available parking, including the garage.
But okay, so
No, I
follow
just-
up if I.
Follow up.
Thank you. But again, so these are the things. So then we're gonna send out police officers or maintenance inspector guys to make sure that they have their garage clean and that there's a car in the garage. The time to go through this and do the inspections. I mean, we do rental inspections so that we don't have overcrowding and then we have 50 cars in the parking lot. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but You know, I'd rather we focused on the people parking on their front lawn, you know, 3 cars at a time. I don't know.
Mayor?
Honestly, start doing that permit stuff, 1 car, what's gonna happen is, the 1 car they're gonna put across the street to the neighbor's house, you're gonna get, oh, he's parking every day in front of my house. And the only reason he's not putting that 3rd car in the driveway is because somebody has to rotate cars in the morning. Well, you know what? You figure that stuff out, because I used to put my car in the garage and the kids are all blocked. I'm the first one to leave. I had to move 1 or 2 cars to get out. So now I parked outside in the back, so I'm the first one to go. You can do that, but you're gonna get some people that, oh, they got the extra car, they're just gonna jam it right there in the front and leave it forever. Forget it.
There's always the option of State Farm's commercial, like a good neighbor. Your neighbors don't even drive, and that driveway's wide open. Ask if you could rent a piece of their asphalt or concrete. Alderman Jacob.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Chief, I mean, is there certain areas you're seeing this? Because I'm just trying to think of our ward. I mean, I could think of maybe of a few houses. I mean, the problem with the cars in front of the sidewalk, I mean, there's a ton of houses in our ward that I could think of, but where somebody would actually need a permit for the parking, to park on the street,
Your driveways,
I could maybe come up
your
with,
driveways are like runways at O'Hare Airport. It's not like the rest of the community. You could put 6 cars on your driveways plus the garage. At least some of my friends.
so I'm just curious, I mean,
No, I guess in response to that, it's something that comes up sporadically from different residents who have different situations that say, I really want to have an overnight parking permit beyond the 5 days that we do allow them on a monthly basis. So it's not hundreds of locations, but it does come up sporadically.
Alderwoman, not you, Peter, lady next to you.
I didn't know if he was done or not. So, I'm fine with the extending the overnight parking over the sidewalk, you know, to have that, I think, 9 to maybe 7 is fine, or even earlier. I don't know if people in the summertime start walking earlier, but it seems like that would alleviate quite a few areas. But for the parking permit for the 5 times a month, is that per household or per car?
That's per household.
Household, so regardless, like they couldn't change that to different cars?
Correct.
It's just per address, that's it?
Correct.
Okay.
And the other important thing is, if anyone's doing any projects, you know, they have they're doing a driveway, they're doing construction, we work with those people too, but in general, you know, people get the five days a month.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's just per resident, okay, thanks.
Yes.
Alderman Jacob, you'll be the last question, and the next hand up, I hope, is to make a motion.
okay,
Alderman Jacob.
so just Alderman Woods again mentioned, talked about we'd have more and more people asking for permits, or people are gonna, all of a sudden, oh, I have 4 cars, I'm gonna go out and buy a 5th car, because now I could get a permit. I mean, I think maybe we just give the police department discretion when, something comes up. I mean, you guys could say, okay, well, it's typically 5 days, but we understand your scenario. We'll allow it for 10 days, but not permanently. I mean, I think you guys should have the discretion to do that in the certain areas you
Chief?
have the problem.
Yeah, and that's the one thing, is I do want to have some consistency. It is written into the ordinance that we have, the discretion up to 5 days and/or situations such as construction and that, but what we don't want to get into is, well, this house, we're going to allow 20 days a month and, every month, and this other house, no, everyone else gets 5, maybe 6, because they have a real special situation or whatever. You want to be consistent is our concern.
I know I said the next hand up would be a motion, but Alderman Curriali, I'm going to give in to
Yeah.
your hand that was up.
I'm sort of concerned about the sidewalk parking. We've changed to 9 o'clock at night. Certainly that's probably better than 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock. I know people are oftentimes out walking dogs or whatever. But in the morning, if we allow till 7 o'clock, you said it at 7, and some people are going to be 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. And what about school children that are walking the sidewalks? I wouldn't want them to have to walk around cars out into the road. I don't know how big a problem this is. I know I'm a frequent walker, and occasionally I come across many homes where there are at least 2 cars parked on the sidewalk in the middle of the day. So I have a bit of concern about that. Overnight, no issue, but during the daytime, as far as safety, convenience to walkers, if kids are riding their bike on the sidewalks, cars are blocking them currently, it's not a good idea, I don't think, to get into go the direction of allowing people to park on the sidewalks.
So this does give us some direction and consistency then that, I'd feel much more comfortable with us addressing the ones over the sidewalk during the day when there's exemptions at night, because if we, with the last time that there was some enforcement and a little bit of lack of discretion on it, the outcomes, it was not very good. I'll just leave it at that. So we've tried to just individually address households when there's been complaints. If you allow for the overnight stuff, this will allow us to go, hey, if you want to park it there, you got to get it off there by the morning, so people, you got moms that are walking their, kids in a stroller, or kids on bikes, or people in wheelchairs. We want to have the sidewalks available for them during the day. So I think this would accomplish a lot of those goals.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, so city manager brought up a good point, is we've talked a little bit about 6, a little bit about 7. Again, we don't care what that direction is, but I think 9 seems to be the consensus for evening. Is there a consensus for the morning? Do you want to make it 6?
6 sounds good.
I would make it before the school bus arrives, well in advance of that. That was an excellent point, Alderman Curiali. Because if you go too far in, you're trespassing. If you go too far out, you're in the street, which is a definite safety hazard.
Okay, so 9 to 6, is that kind of the consensus we're getting?
Okay. So who's making that motion?
So I'll make the motion to revise it, to look at the part where the working vehicles, the exception for one, if they have a working vehicle, and if they, bring the letter like you said, if they can park on the street, that one working vehicle, if they don't have enough space to park their cars, if all those spots are taken up by the residentials that live there, but they have no room for the working van or vehicle. So that's on a case-by-case basis.
There was some confusion on the faces of the board here when you said a working vehicle. What did you mean by that, Tom?
Well, all the way down, it says permanent vehicles may be, remain at the same spot, not that one. All vehicles registered to the address except for one company vehicle. Passenger in consideration with a single family versus a letter by the employer.
So it sounds like you're wanting to make the motion on the overnight parking permit, but nothing on, so I think as I talk, we should separate the two and decide on them. They could be separable, but you're looking for action on the overnight parking permit right now.
Right.
All right, we'll go back to discussion because there's multiple points here. Mayor, did you want to say something?
I would just concur with the chief. Let's make a motion for the times and whatnot, and then a separate motion if we're gonna park any cars on the street.
I like that.
That
Stick
makes-
with the
that
time
makes-
element first. Alderman Woods, did you want to add to the time element?
No, but I'll help us out. So I'll make a motion to approve the parking over the sidewalk, 9 PM to 6 AM in the morning.
Second.
Very good. Thanks for helping out, Alderman Woods. Roll call, please.
Alderman Catalano,
Yes.
Alderman Currielli,
Yes.
Alderman Jacob,
Yes.
Alderman Ames,
Yes.
Alderman Sorrentino,
Yes.
Alderman Messina,
Yes.
and Alderman Woods.
Yes.
Okay, that'll be part of the amendment. Did we want
And
to?
now I want my question back. After I helped you out.
All right. I'm being strong-armed. Go ahead, Alderman Woods.
Now, I think that this the latter part of this discussion, the permit thing is the same as the garbage thing. I think we need to look at that language a little more. I don't know that we'll argue about this for another hour. I think whether it's a work vehicle, not a work vehicle, registered, not registered, right? We kind of all understand what we want it to be, right? We want more compliance and not add more cars to houses that can't handle more cars. So what that sounds like or how we're gonna call that language out, you know, work vehicle versus a regular homeowner vehicle, that doesn't make sense to me, right?
I think what the chief was referring to is a company-owned vehicle. You're given a car to work.
Right, no, that,
It's not like
I understand what he's saying.
A van or anything.
Because then my argument then is, so since I don't get a company vehicle, I can't park my car in the street, although I have 5 cars. Right?
Lease it
That's
to
my
yourself.
And if I was clarifying, that was just one of the points that I thought you should consider, that some towns, they only allow vehicles that are owned by the resident, you know, registered to the residents,
Yeah.
but some do allow for one of those vehicles to be a company-issued vehicle. I'm not saying that only I don't know if Alderman Catalano was referring to operable vehicles as opposed to working vehicles, but, you know, that you were looking to not have long-term storage outside, but cars that were working. So I wasn't advocating for only if you have a work vehicle allowed to.
Right, I didn't think you were.
Yeah.
And I didn't think he meant inoperable, he meant a company-supplied car
Okay.
to the employee. I get that, but that can't be a basis to knock me out from doing the same thing, because I don't get a company car.
Alderman Messina?
Yeah, I mean, I have a problem with the work vehicle, right? This is public health, safety, right? So to me, having a work vehicle on the street when these guys can't run the plate and know that it goes to that home, to me, you know, is gonna be an issue. Because if they're in the middle of the night and they're patrolling, you wanna see that. I mean, there's 2 subdivisions in our ward now that are already considering tightening up their own bylaws to make it even tighter than what we have with the city, because they're so scared that a commercial vehicle, I always think of Home Alone in my head, right? That vehicle that doesn't belong there, whether it's a plumbing truck or whatever it might be, they get it. They're not gonna know that example, but Woods Heating and Air belongs to Dave Wood. It may not, right? Or, so to me, I just think that, I know, bad example, sorry. Sorry, you know, so to me,
I'm used to it.
I would not be for a corporate vehicle where it's registered back to a corporate entity and just makes more guesswork for you guys, and then you gotta wonder whether, to me, it's a very straightforward, Messina lives here, Messina's car here, not whatever, IBM Corporation leases the car to me, and you guys don't have a clue if I work there or not. That's the problem.
And if you did choose to allow something like that, then I would say that that would be the vehicle, that vehicle needs to be in the driveway, and it has to be.
Right.
Right, I think we need to put, I guess, and the point I wanna make is like, there needs to be skin in the game. We're making all these accommodations for people. I think someone mentioned it earlier. You made a conscious decision to buy more vehicles than you can fit in the driveway. So you need to, now get up out of bed at 5:45 to move the car. That's what you need to do. And secondly, yeah, you need to move your company car in the driveway and move a personal car there. I mean, I think we need to have them put some skin in the game if we're gonna make this accommodation, because it's just more work for PD, so.
Right.
Alderman Jacob?
And the other comment with the giving people permits, I mean, I know people that actually, you know, like Alderman Sorrentino said, some people will rent a parking space from a neighbor or ask a neighbor, hey, could I park in your driveway? I mean, I see giving the permit as becoming a big issue. To Alderman Wood's point, you're gonna have everybody and their sister asking for a permit to park on the street, and eventually we're gonna have cars all over the streets, in my opinion.
Alderman Nadine?
Thank you. So
Alderwoman.
I mean, I know we're talking about commercial vehicles or, you know, company-issued vehicles too, but I'm just thinking of the family. Like, I have 3 kids, we all have cars, so there's 5 drivers in my house. It's not a work vehicle situation. It's literally just the people living in my house. I only have, you know, 4 available, you know, 2 in the garage, 2 in the driveway. That's all I can fit. What happens to that person? I don't have the exact answer, but I think that's kind of what Alderman Catalano was talking about with his situation and his ward, is that that person will never have space to park that fifth vehicle anywhere but the street, because there's just literally no room for it. So is there a solution? Is there something that we can do as a city to help that person not get 15 parking tickets a month? You know, because there's no place to go. I mean, maybe ask a neighbor to use a driveway. I don't know if that's an option. I don't know. But that's, you know, putting the commercial vehicle aside, that's kind of the issue that I'm hearing,
Right.
you know, that you have, and I don't know.
Well,
Besides some kind of a parking permit, I don't know what else to do with the car, because if I have that in my family, I don't know where else we park the car.
and that's again where we don't know if people are utilizing all their garage space. I don't know.
Right.
And perhaps the ability to park over the sidewalk in the overnight hours will alleviate some of it. I don't know. It's gonna depend on each specific
Right, and
situation,
my,
so.
like, I'm just using my house for an example, and I guess bad example, because I'm on a corner and whatever, but, like, I don't have a sidewalk in my driveway, so that's not really, that doesn't affect me. But if I literally had all my kids at home, everybody's car there, we wouldn't have enough space. So where would I go with it? You know, other than asking a neighbor to park in a driveway, which, yeah, you definitely could do, but, you know, I don't know what they would do with a car. So it's an issue.
Alderman Jacob, maybe you could help her with that answer?
Well, Chief, you had mentioned the 5 days and some uniformity. I mean, would it help for us to say, okay, we'll give the police department latitude for 10 days? Now you have uniformity, would that help the situation at all, or no? I mean, again, I'm not sure of the situations you've had so far, but.
I don't know. I am aware of one situation that it's pretty much every day. You know, so 10 days isn't gonna make the difference there, and, I think either you stick with 5 or you go with a permitting system, one of the two. 10 isn't gonna solve every problem. If it's really, I guess put it this way, if it's truly a problem that you have so many kids living at home and cars that consistently you need to use all those spaces plus the street, 10 days isn't gonna solve it. So I would stick with 5 and make a decision whether you want overnight parking or not, as a permitted system.
Follow up, Alderman Jacob? Yeah. What are you gonna do? Your hands up, down, up,
No,
down?
she said exactly what I was gonna say. It's not gonna fix the problem. Relevant.
City manager?
Just one other thing that didn't get brought up, and I kind of have to mention it. It would be, in the wintertime, an additional headache with snow operations. You cannot account for what nights we're going to do snow operations, so that's also a factor.
One closing-
Alderman Woods?
Yeah. All valid points. I think the snow plowing is probably the top one, but, I mean, the concept would be coming up with a criteria to allow the parking stickers, right, or permits. And what would that look like? And again, we gotta go out to police it, right, to review properties. It's almost like another property maintenance inspection type of thing. Again, I know I'm gonna be the bad guy, but, I mean, we can't solve all problems. You buy a house or rent a place, right? And if you have space or don't have space, then I don't know, you move, you find a bigger place, buy smaller cars, park in a neighbor's parking lot, or whatever. I don't think we're gonna be able to solve this, because it's just, you know, if one car's okay, then we're gonna be arguing about the second car, or the third car.
Oh, boy. Okay, I'm gonna go with Alderman Messina.
Just real quick comment. I agree with you if it's something in their influence. I can buy a car. I give validity to the folks at the airport. Some say that, yes, you chose the house by the airport, but you didn't choose the path, right? Or I didn't choose to have 83, now all of a sudden want to become the next, Harlem Avenue with commercial and retail, right? So like, I understand where you're going, but I also think there's a huge fine line on some of those things that if it's within our circle of influence, like you chose to buy a car, that's your choice. You made that valid opinion, I didn't choose the runways, I didn't choose them to flip them and run them over people's houses. I didn't choose to have certain developments where they're just all of a sudden, becomes insane. So fair point. I just want to make sure that there's a distinction here. At least that's how I feel. There needs to be somewhat of a distinction. I get what you're saying. I get it. At some point, we can't fix every problem.
We can try.
Again,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we don't come up with a permit. I'm saying, what does that look like when we do it?
Yeah.
And where does that go? Right, because I can drive around, as I often do, and there's houses that have 10 cars, 7 cars, 9 cars. Do they all live there? I don't know. Are they all related? I don't know any of those things. I just don't know how you write that language and how you make those decisions and where they stop. So if you can come up with something, I'm all ears.
Mayor?
Yeah, the other thing is, a lot of these garages, people are using bulk spots for stuff, whatever stuff. So we're gonna start telling people, get your junk out of there so you can move your cars.
Well,
You know, again, this goes back to being a good neighbor and whatnot. And when things happen, I could tell you 5 years ago, when we did some remodeling, my garage was, you know, material central. I had 5 cars. I went to the neighbor's house. I said, hey, can I do you a favor? And I used one spot on their driveway every day. And I got up early and moved it so they didn't interfere with them.
and that was where my suggestion, if you want to do something like this, they've got to use all their available storage. We got to have a minimum 2-week notice, and there's got to be a fee for doing it so we can go out there and inspect. It's gonna,
Skin in the game.
whatever you guys implement, we'll get accomplished, but that would have to be some of the guidelines that.
So now we got inspectors going to make sure people's garages are clean.
Alderman Jacob?
Based on the fact that you said there's really one that you could think of that's again, we can't solve everybody's problems. I would make a motion not to allow permit parking.
You don't have to do anything. No motion.
Or just to
That's
keep it
the
the
way it is now.
same. Keep it the same then, the way it is.
Okay, so we have the motion, I believe. No. The time, did we vote on that?
We did.
We already did.
We're competing with the budget time with the meetings, so we're done with report number 2. Hallelujah. Report 3, this better be quick. An approval of the replacement of squad number 401 in an amount not to exceed $34,963. That is my motion.
Second.
Peace out.
One more question.
Sure, go ahead.
I think I saw it in your last email when we were exchanging. Same vehicle as the others, but watch commander would be at least on the car. Is that correct?
Correct.
On the interceptors, okay.
Yeah, it would be denoted as watch commander car.
Okay, your points were all valid that you listed, so
Okay.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Call the roll, please, or the vote, whatever, call something.
Alderman Catalano,
Yes.
Alderman Currielli,
Yes.
Alderman Jacob,
Yes.
Alderman Ames,
Yes.
Alderman Sorrentino,
Yes.
Alderman Messina.
Yes.
Alderman Woods.
Yes.
Can we have a discussion on the adjournment or a motion? Which do you prefer? Second? All in favor? We're adjourned. Hallelujah. Public Works, little handoff. Now, that commander takes the car home, who's it?
I take it back. Peter made
Park on the street. or
motion.
drive?
Yeah, Peter.
Do they need a city sticker?
Hi, Ellen.
Yeah. Ready for him?
Absolutely.
I'd like to call the Public Works Committee meeting to order. Minute taker note that everybody is still in attendance or present. Up first, I'd like to entertain a motion to.
I'll make the motion to approve the
Second.
minutes December 9, 2021.
Okay. Report and recommendations. Oh, sorry, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Report and recommendation. First up, an approval of an agreement between the City of Wooddale and Engineering Resource Associates, Inc. for professional services for stormwater improvements in an amount not to exceed $45,500. That's my motion.
Second.
Alderman Woods?
While reading this and taking a couple phone calls regarding this, came up with a kind of a different point of view that what we're doing here. A lot of this stuff is duplicative of the prior 2013 Baxter and Woodman study. So part of me asked the question, why do we want to restudy something we already studied? As opposed to taking the $45,000, telling the engineer, go do South Cedar Street, get the engineering done, and move forward on that, and then take the next one next year and do the same thing.
Director Lang?
Sure, so part of the reason is the update to the rainfall data, which occurred a couple years ago. We saw with the Ward 2 and 3 stormwater project that had significant impact on the type and size of the infrastructure needed for that project. It increased the budget significantly. So the second reason would be the holistic approach that ERA kind of laid out in their proposal by combining the three areas which they identified into a singular model because they're tributary to each other. There's the possibility that they could come up with a singular project to resolve those issues which hadn't been identified yet. And then there's also the possibility, since they are partnering currently with DuPage County and Bensonville, and that they've received some grant funding for, there's the possibility that they can combine our project into that project and possibly receive some grant funding for us as well.
Any more follow-ups?
No.
Any questions? Alderman Jacob?
They have done work for us in the past, this company?
I have not personally worked with them, but they have done a 2010 study for us, and that's the only one that I'm aware of at the
Okay.
moment.
Mayor?
Aren't these the guys that did the stream bank?
Director Lang? Or Woods?
Anybody remember? I believe,
I don't recall, yeah.
or did they do it for the Forest Preserve, maybe?
They didn't do it for us. They've done 2 major projects for Bensonville.
They've done the Salt Creek improvements on the Forest Preserve
For the
property for the
forest,
golf course.
that's where they, okay.
Mhm.
So they're
Follow.
familiar with the area.
Alderman Curot?
I have a couple of questions. In response to what Director Lang just said, the holistic approach, reading through it looks like they preferred a overland, above ground type drainage system rather than an improvement to the storm sewers. Is that correct?
Director Lang?
They did include improving some overland flow routes which have been obstructed over the years as part of their scope, but there are several underground infrastructure projects that they have identified as well.
Okay. There's 5 projects here listed, right?
There's 5 areas,
Right,
correct?
5 areas. Do you have an idea how many properties are involved in each of the projects and whether the flooding is causing any financial concerns or damages?
I don't have any of that information right now. I could try to look into that. These are not in any type of flood zone or special flood hazard area. These are more storm event related for excessive, like 100-year storms and so on. So I don't have any type of information on number of properties impacted or any type of insurance claims at this time, but.
Alderman Jacob?
I
Oh,
was gonna
sorry,
say-
Curot.
Just
Please
one
don't.
last question to follow up on what Alderman Woods said. I mean, they're going to look at this and see if they can come up with a holistic approach, but possibly they won't. Is that
That's correct.
the
Yes,
case as well? And for Cedar, we've already looked at it twice. We have 2 studies.
The 2013 study really just reaffirmed the findings of the 2010 study.
Right, so this would be a 3rd study, which would potentially do the
What would
same
essentially
thing?
be is the first thing that ERA would do is they would just update the modeling, which they've already conducted with the new rainfall data and see how that impacts their recommendation and their estimates of probable costs. That's probably the reason why ERA was the lowest fees, because they already have that information available to them and it's easy enough for them to just update their modeling.
But Director Lang, you made a good point. That's also updating the bill of materials. Is
Correct.
that correct? Which probably have gone up.
Correct. As we found with the Ward 2 and 3 stormwater project, after they updated the rainfall data, some of the rainfall totals increased by nearly 20% for any given storm event. So that required us to add additional storage, which in that project equated to multi-million dollars, which of course it's on a much larger scale than these areas. But it does have a significant impact on materials and costs.
Alderman Curot, another follow-up?
Wait, one last question, I'm sorry. There's potentially some federal money available for this?
ERA does have an agreement currently with Bensonville on a joint project along 83, which several of these areas are tributary to. So there is the possibility that if we were able to combine with them, that some of that federal money could extend to us as well.
Is there any special requirements that we do a certain approach? Like, could we pick off one of these projects, one per year, and still be eligible for that funding?
I'm not aware of any special requirements. I'm sure once, if an agreement is awarded to ERA, we'll get all the details on that in short order.
Thank
And
you.
45 covers all 5 projects?
3 of the areas were identified as being tributary to each other, and I believe those are also tributary to the 83 drainage route as well.
Would that make, if we were to take the route of Alderman Curriello, would that change the scope or the scope of this job where they'd rebid, or is it still, are we still on the hook for 45?
If we were, you're saying to look at these each individually?
Yeah, if we were to break them out, so you just said, I think I heard you say 3 out of the 5 essentially could possibly qualify for federal funding. Would we need this study, this updated study, bill of materials, I guess we'll call it, first, to then ask for that money, to apply for that grant?
Yes, I don't think we're at the phase now where we could jump right into phase 1 engineering for any of these projects.
Okay.
There's still a lot of information gathering that we would have to do to see if the project is even feasible before we could decide whether we're eligible for any federal funding.
Federal funding would not be for this actual update study. It's when we get to engineering,
Correct.
and all that good stuff.
and
that we would actually
construction.
qualify. Okay. But this would help us justify or help the strength of any grant proposal, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Alderman Curriello? Good, okay. Alderman Jacob?
Yeah, I just wanted to answer one of Alderman Curriello's questions. The one on Aspen has 2 homes, and Randy and I have seen pictures, their whole basement has been flooded multiple times, so I know one of them for you.
Alderman Sorrentino?
I'm just concerned with this being the 3rd study, and I know when I came on board here, there were a lot of studies and a lot of money paid, and nothing was brought forward. And let's assume that this study says XYZ, are we in a financial position to make a move on this study?
Good question.
Or is it just going to sit and get dusty, and when we do have the budget, do we need a restudy, which should be the 4th time?
Good question. Alderman Lang?
We believe so. And one of the reasons why we wanted to do this as a study was for capital planning purposes, as it will be multiple projects. Part of the deliverable will be for them to help us develop a capital plan to plan for these projects. We've budgeted $250,000 in construction costs over the next few years to accommodate these projects if possible.
Follow-up?
No, congratulations, there's a plan, I love it.
Thank you. Alderman Woods?
Thank you. So going back to your statement and my prior statement, you just said the same things that I was thinking. We know that the new stormwater model has increased, I hate this mask, has increased the allowable flow by 20%, right? And we can calculate that materials have gone up a number, whatever that's 35 cents or 35% or 40% from the 2013 numbers. The street's still the same, the properties are still the same. Why can't we just look at that and go program that to be engineered, Cedar Street? We've looked at it 3 times, or this will be the 3rd time in fairness, but it's been a problem over the years and it only gets worse. This is one I look at and go, why can't we just take this off the list and plug it in to get engineered?
I agree, and if South Cedar was a standalone project, I would agree with you wholeheartedly, although South Cedar is one of the 3 areas which combine into a tributary where a single project, if possible, could possibly solve the flooding issues for all 3 locations. So while it's up to the council, I would recommend that we at least look into that aspect, whereas instead of having 3 separate projects, we could possibly combine it into one that would solve flooding issues for all 3 areas.
Go ahead.
So what other pieces tied into this one physically? I know that they could be tributary to each other, right? They're in the same watershed or tributary, as you put it. But are the pipes in any way connected? Does one and in any way affect the other. And that physically could just be looked at. We don't need any major study to do that. We've done enough studies to answer that question. I guess that's what I'm asking.
Correct. So the three areas that they've identified as being kind of connected, that they would take the holistic approach in viewing is South Cedar, Montclair and Aspen, and Deer Path and Edgewood.
Which all flow to 80.
Which, right, South Cedar outfalls into the wooded area behind, to the east of South Cedar, which overflows into Montclair and Aspen, which is part of their flooding issues. Those flow to a storm sewer, which eventually conveys to Deer Path and Edgewood, and then makes its way south to the Royal
But
Oaks.
neither of them have dependency on the other, I don't believe.
That's
Am I?
what we're hoping ERA will tell us.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mayor?
So, South Cedar, the water comes from the west, east of Wooddale Road, and everything flows past the house that, with the driveway on South Cedar. And to be honest with you, I pulled out the old 2010, the cost for a detention basin upstream was $400,000 for a 25-year level of protection. They also talk about replacing the existing storm sewer, which I believe we did some of that when we redid the street. But another one was buy the one house. There's a few. The fact is, the water's running east, and as it goes east, it goes through the woods, all the way past Iroquois, Montclair, and Aspen, Deer Path, the whole deal. It's kind of connected. So if we could find out, honestly, my personal feeling is if we could slow the water down on the west side of Cedar, back there, I think that might solve more problems going along. But I'm not an engineer, that's just my opinion.
I think going back to Alderman Sorrentino said, is if there is a plan, that's great, because I'd take that a step further, because that's my ward, right? And I would tell you that even Deer Path impacts what comes into Woodside, which I know you've been brought over, and you
Right.
guys made an agreement with them before my time, right? So it comes downstream, and it impacts us, even the Woodside, which is now, which never was a flooding, threat or risk. So now we're getting some of those reports, as well as Whispering Oak. So there's other areas, even though we're really focused on those three, that should fix the problem. But there's other, I don't want to call it, but other areas that inherently are going to be impacted by that as well. So if we fix those three key areas, which have long been an issue up here, I think it's going to help everything else, and it's going to be part of that broader Ward 1 study that we're aiming to.
And again,
Go ahead, Mayor.
again, if we can regionalize this and because the county stormwater is looking for these regional projects and they have money to give towards this, right?
Yeah.
So if we can come up with a plan that's gonna significantly help, I'm not gonna say it's gonna eliminate everything, but if we could stop the rivers coming from South Cedar, from west of South Cedar, and they just go right through those houses like it's a rapid, right? And it shoots all the way through. And we tried the forest preserve, stonewalled over there multiple times, and they're telling us how it's pristine and this and that, and nothing's happening in those forest preserves. To put it, we talked about putting something in there, even sat down with the board presidents, and it's not happening.
That's part of my point. We've been talking about it. So
Right.
I'm done asking questions. I asked, so.
So there's
I mean,
a
we
plan, Alderman Jacob.
No, I think the mayor just mentioned the forest preserve. I was just gonna bring that up, but you mentioned that.
All right, so do we have a motion?
You have a motion and a second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Alderman Catalano,
Yes.
Alderman Currielli,
Oh,
no?
no.
Alderman Jacob,
Yes.
Alderman Ames,
Yes.
Alderman Sorrentino,
Yes.
Alderman Messina,
Yes.
Alderman Woods.
No.
And that passes. Items to be considered at future meetings. Public Works Facility Bids, Phase 2, Winter 2022. Have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second. Aye.
We are adjourned. Good evening.